Hello and welcome to Outdoors with Nat. In this video I'm going to be making Greenland wax from scratch, so paraffin wax and beeswax combined, and we'll warm that up and turn that into nice bars which can then be spread over your cotton canvas products to re-waterproof those or waterproof those initially. The recipe for Greenland wax is 90% paraffin wax, 10% beeswax. We'll heat these up to combine them and then set them into a block in a bar in our plastic container. Once that's cool, we'll be able to spread them over our cotton canvas products to waterproof or re-waterproof those items. For this recipe, I'm going to be making about 1 kilo of Greenland wax. I'm aiming for 100 grams of beeswax and 900 grams of the paraffin wax. So I've got my bowl. I'm going to zero that on my scales. Now I'm going to add our 100 grams of beeswax. So one thing you'll notice here is that beeswax is a lot softer than your paraffin wax. Your paraffin wax at room temperature is a solid, and beeswax at room temperature is quite sticky and very malleable. And so we're adding the paraffin wax to both provide a better waterproof layer, but also stiffen up that, because at room temperature, paraffin wax is a real solid. So I've got 100 grams of beeswax in there, and I'm gonna add 900 grams of paraffin wax. So I've got my bowl of beeswax and paraffin wax. I'm gonna put that into a water bath on the stove, and that will heat up to about 60 to 80 degrees, melt it down into a single liquid. Then I'll pour it into our plastic containers and they'll set in our solid blocks. So if you're making a kilo of wax like I just have, it takes quite a while for the wax to fully melt. Once it's fully melted, you can see I can stir it around and it's fully dissolved, and you can't tell what was paraffin wax and what was beeswax. The next stage is to very carefully, and while the wax is still hot, I'm going to pour it into our molds here, and then we'll let this cool and it will set as a solid. Once it's set as a solid, then it will be ready to use. So, laying out my molds. If you do spill some wax like I just have, it's best if you can wipe it up as much as you can while it's hot, and then once it's cooled down you will be able to scrape it off a bit later. So there we have our 4 containers of the Greenland wax. This will take about half an hour for it to go solid, and then it will be ready to use after that. The next part of the Greenland wax system is to apply the wax which you've made to your cotton canvas product. So I've got 2 sets of pants here, and the thicknesses of the canvas are slightly different, and that's going to make a little bit difference on how we apply the wax to the canvas, but otherwise the process is pretty much the same. You're going to wipe it on in nice smooth strokes, and then we'll heat it up with an iron, or you can use a hairdryer as well, to melt the wax into the fabric, and then you've got your waterproofing on there. So when you're applying the Greenland wax to your product, you need to make sure that you don't have any divots in the surface below, and any creases on the back side of the fabric, if you're working through both layers, will show up on the front side as well. So if you've got a seam or a pocket on the back, then you need to be careful that you don't apply too much wax over that section, because all those lumps and ridges will show up on the top side of the canvas. And I can show you that just here. If I have my pocket section and I scrape it on, we can see the wax gets attached to the pocket. So to fix this, we can use something that's nice and flat. I've just got a piece of flat timber here, and that's giving me a really smooth surface to apply my wax. And then I want to use nice long strokes, and it doesn't matter if I'm going against the grain or across the grain. We just want to have a really even coating of the wax on the surface of our product. And so you end up with something like that, and I'll move it across a little bit. So now we can see we've got a pretty smooth layer of wax there, and it does bunch up where you run into seams and that type of things. So this is quite a thick cotton canvas, and I'll show you the difference. If I apply this to the thin canvas, which I've got here, the fabric is going to bunch and pull, so it's a little more difficult to put on, and you can see here that it tends to make kind of these lines where it makes creases. So really getting the fabric as tight as possible, and then trying to get that really even layer of wax over the top, which can be tricky in a thinner fabric. And then you can add some extra bits to the seams, maybe around the cuff, put a bit of a thicker layer on that section, just as even as possible in your application. You can always come back and add a little bit more to bits that you missed over time. There we have a nice even surface of wax. Part of this process is working out where you want to apply the wax to increase the water repellency of the fabric in that area. So for me, in these pants, I'm going to apply it mostly up the front, but not right around the top, because that's often covered by your upper layer of rainwear. I'm going to apply it to the back where you'd sit down, but I'm going to leave the areas just behind the knees a little bit lighter, so that the breathability is maintained in those areas more than the waterproofness, because they're not going to get as much contact in water if I'm walking through a wet scrub, etc. Put a lot more wax on the front sides of these pants compared to the back, particularly behind the knees. I've only got a really light coat there, and so now we're ready to melt the wax in, and we've got our iron heated up, ready to do that. So I've got my iron here, and the key thing is that you want to have it on no steam setting, so no putting out any water from the bottom. And then the other thing is, if you want to, you can also use a piece of grease-proof baking paper to just make sure you don't get anything on the surface of the bottom of your iron, particularly if you've used these pants to like work or something and you've got paint or glue stains on them as well. And my iron, it's got no steam on it, and I'm going to lay my paper over and just work that in. And if I lift up the corner here, you'll be able to see the iron is heating up the wax, and it's melting right into there. And so as you do this process, the wax will spread out into the fabric and be absorbed by those cotton fibers. And so there you can see I've ironed in that section. It doesn't really change the color of it too much. It maybe makes it slightly darker as a result of the wax layer on there. And where you've got streaks and things, it does spread out without too much trouble, and then it just gets absorbed into the pant. have it. How do you increase the water resistance of your cotton canvas pants or products using Greenland Wax as our mechanism? Check out this. Just beads right off these cactus canvas pants. Check out my other videos and have a great outdoor adventure.